Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be looking at building a Spring Boot application using a hexagonal architecture. But since hexagonal architecture works so well with the domain-driven design, we're going to have some hints of it. So we're going to look at some concepts and see how we can implement this in our app. But let's not get too far ahead. First, let's talk about what we actually need to do. So our application or our task for today is quite simple. We want to implement an application that needs to be able to do the following things. So it should be able to cache some person objects in memory or in Redis, whatever we want, but we're going to go with memory. And we should also be able to save persons in the database in some external application. And then additionally, our clients can read the data from the cache, so whatever is cached, and in case that we have a cache miss, they should be able to read it from the database. And as we said earlier, we want to do this with the hexagonal architecture. So let's have a look at how our application might look like. One typical case that you can see in hexagonal architecture is that you split your application into either packages or build modules. In this case, we're just going to go with packages. So we're going to have the in package, we're going to have the core, and we're going to have the out package. You can see the explanations here on the side. So the core, this is our domain logic, our business logic. This is what our application does. So this is what we're going to be implementing there. And what's important is that the core cannot depend on anything. So there are no external dependencies. Everything that core does and has, it's its own. So no imports from anywhere else. But since we're working with Spring Boot, we can say, okay, this is so essential to our application that we allow this kind of dependency. But if you don't want to do that, there are also ways around it, and let me know if you're interested. We can make a video on that. Okay, then we also have the in package. These are the entry points in our application. So this can be anything. It can be a REST control. It could be some kind of RabbitMQ listener, whatever. In our case, it's just going to be a REST controller. And then we have the out package. This is where the interface implementation. So in the core, we have some interfaces, and they are going to be implemented in the out package. So this is how our application talks to the outside world. And yeah, to sum it up, this is it. So in talks to the core, you can have direct calls to the service. You can have direct access to everything that the core has, and core talks to the out. So it must go through a port. So core has a port, which is the interface, and the out has an adapter, which is the implementation of that interface. And then we need to have a look at the DDD, or the domain-driven design. So there are a few concepts from it. So we have something like an entity. This is something that has an identity. It basically has an ID, so you can think of it of that. Then you also have some kind of value objects. They don't have an identity. They're just defined by value. And the entity itself can also be an aggregate root. So this is some kind of entity that controls some other entities or some other value objects. We're going to have a look at this a bit later, so I can show you an example of that. And then you would also have something called application service. This is what you would think about, just an application service or a normal service, and it's just used to orchestrate all of the use cases that our domain has. Okay, now let's jump into the code. Let's see how we can implement this. So we are here in IntelliJ, where I have set up a project for us. It's actually quite simple. So if you looked at our dependencies here, you can see that we only have Spring Boot starter web. So we don't have anything fancy and nothing special. I have the application class here, which is as usual, and I've already created the three mentioned packages that we saw in the introduction. So we have our core, we have our in, and then we have our out. Okay, so the first things first, we start with the core. It is mentioned that we want to be able to cache some person objects. So what we're going to do to start with, we're going to create a new record, and we're going to name this person. So this person will have an identity, so it will be an entity. We're just going to have here a string ID. Maybe we're going to have a string name. For now, this might be enough. We also want this person to have an address. So we can say here address, yeah, just address. And now we need to create this. Okay, it's offering me to import something, and this is not what you want. We want to create a record called address in the core. Yes. And what's the address gonna have? So this is where it gets bit into the DDD. So the person that we created is an entity because it has an ID, it has an identifier. The address, you could potentially have an address without an identification, so it would be just defined by a value. I don't know, like a street or something like this, but we don't really want to do that. We just want to have an identification here. And then string street and street number. Okay, so this is going to be the street and this is going to be the street number, and we have the ID of the address because let's say those addresses are cached also or stored somewhere in the database or something like this. Okay, good. Then we go back to the person. Now in the person, we also want to have a contact. So let's contact, and maybe let's name it email somewhere here. So we're going to create, actually, no, I don't want to create, I want to create a record. And now this is going to be our value object. So this is not, it's not going to have, an ID, so there's no identification. It's just defined by a value. Now you can, within this contact, you could do some validation or something like this. So this is also valid. So you can, within the records, you could do a validation to validate that the contact is correct and so on. This is totally fine in the sense of DDD. You can do whatever you want within these classes in terms of validation or in terms of checking the data so that you always have the correct stuff created. You can do the same in the person. You can say, okay, I want to allow creation of persons without address, or I don't want to allow it, or without email, or whatever you want. So this is also possible. Okay, good. So we have created this. Let me then split our core package into entity. So we're going to have entities, which is going to be the address and a person. So we're going to put this there. Let's refactor. And then again, we're going to create a new package, which is going to be the value object, which is where we're going to put the contact. So this is just for us to be able to split it. And then we're also going to create a new package called service. And then we're going to create a new package called port. So in the port, we're going to put all of the interfaces, all of the APIs. And in the service, we're going to create a service that's going to orchestrate this core domain. In the entity, the person here is now a root aggregate because it is aggregating this entity and also this value object. In the bigger application, you will of course have more logic, so the person could do some stuff. So like person could maybe validate something, or person could execute some tasks and so on, trigger some events in the sense of domain-driven design. But for us, this doesn't really matter. Okay, so now that we have our entities, let's create a service. So we're going to create a new class here. We're just going to name it person service, since we are working with persons. And this is what we said earlier. We are not allowed to use outside dependencies in the core, but since we are working with Spring Framework, we can add a notation to it so that this is managed by Spring. If we did not want to do that, there is a way around with some configuration classes which are outside of this package and are able to detect this, but we don't really want to do this now. Okay, so our person service, so if you remember from our task, it should be able to handle a few things. So it should be able to cache stuff, so it should be able to cache persons, it should be able to read it from the cache, but in case of cache misses, it should be able to get it from the database. So somebody external is storing it in the database. So let's implement two ports. We need two ports. We need one port for caching and we need one port for access to the database. We could not implement caching here. I mean, technically we could, because we could do it in memory and just use some kind of Java stuff that would work. But we don't really want to do that in case that, I don't know, requirements change and say, okay, we don't want to do in-memory caching, we want to do Redis cache, then we cannot implement that in the core anymore. So for this reason, the caching implementation is in the out. So this is the true approach to the hexagonal architecture. All of the implementations of the ports are in the out package. So we're going to have cache port. Let's just name it cache. And then we're going to have database port. I'll just name this one database. Okay, good. Let's now create an interface called cache port, and it's going to be in the port package. Good. Then we go back to the service. We want to create a new interface called database port, and again in the port package. So we are still in the core. We did not create anything in the in or in the out, so those are empty. Okay, good. Now that we have these two, so what our cache port can do, it can cache or add. Let's just name it add, and it's gonna take person in. So it can add a person to the cache and person get. So it can get a person from the cache by, let's say, its ID. So this is the two things that our cache port can do. And then if we look at the database port, so what can the database port do? It can, let's say, just get. So we just want to be able to get the person from the database. Let's say our application is not in charge of storing data in the database or something like this. You can of course do that, but for us it doesn't really matter. So we just want to demonstrate a few things which we can implement here. Okay, so you might be thinking about, okay, does this class, is it really gonna be something that's stored in the database exactly like this? And the answer is no. So your out package here is gonna be taking care of conversion. So you read it from the database or you read it from some external application, it's gonna have some kind of public API. So it's gonna give you a person object. It might not be the same person object as here, and you need to convert it to the one that your core expects. Same goes from the in. Somebody might be requesting something, you don't really want to expose this, you want to expose some DTO or something, so you're gonna have to convert it. Okay, good. Now that that's outside of the way, let's implement all of this. So we're gonna do the constructor here. So we're gonna inject these two. For now, we still don't have the implementation, so the IntelliJ might complain about it, but yeah, let's ignore that. And now we want to implement our use cases. So our use case is clients are able to add something to the cache, and clients are able to read from the cache. So let's go with reading. So we're gonna have public person get, and then we're just gonna have string ID. Okay, and the way we do this is we use the cache first to go get, we pass in the ID, and this is cached person. Now, if we have this, so if the cached person is not null, so if we actually found something in the cache, we can just return it. So it means it's cached, we are returning it. But in case that it is not found, we want to go to the database and we want to get it from the database. So we're going to say database get ID. So this is database person or whatever. And before we return it, we're going to say cache.add. So we want to cache this database person so that in the next turn we fetch it again. And then we just return database person. I don't know, maybe this makes sense. But then we also probably want to have public void add or something save, I don't know, where we take in the person. And we put it directly to the cache. Yeah, so I think this might work, so we don't really... yeah, so then we're going to use this one so that we can manually add something so we can test the application, but you don't actually need to do that, so you could... Yeah, let's get rid of this. I don't really like it because our application is all about caching. It's not about storing data. So we go to the cache first, and there's a cache miss. We go to the database and we catch it. But then in the next one, we are getting it from the cache. So we can get rid of this, which means for us that we can now go to the... Yeah, let's implement this. Let's implement the pods. So we go to the out, and then we want to go and say... cache adapter. So this is going to be SM service, which is going to implement the cache port, and we're going to have implement the methods here. So now this is where the Spring can play a big role. So you can of course use any external dependencies here, and we're going to just use the Spring here to declare this as a Spring Bean. Private static final map, which is going to string person. Let me import this. Yeah, some in-memory storage, new hash map with 10 initial capacity. So add in-memory storage, sorry, put. So we're gonna put person ID and then just the person. Good. And then for the get, it's just going to be in memory storage get by ID. That's it. That's what our cache adapter is gonna do. Now we go create a new class. Again, it's gonna be database adapter, and this implements the database port, of course. And this is gonna read some stuff from the database. I mean, I'm not gonna bother and actually make a connection to the database. We're just gonna have some dummy data returned here. So we can say, let's create a dummy person here. So a new person, which expects now ID. Let's say this is 1, name dummy. And now we need a new address, which has the ID, whatever, street. Yes, and number, whatever. So this is gonna be the address of the person, and then we also need a new contact. So dummy@.com. So this is what we are gonna be returning here as, oops, sorry, return. Yeah. So we're just returning some dummy data. In the real application, you would of course be connecting to the database. Either you would have access to some database repository or something like this, or you would have, if you're going really outside of your application to a different application, then you would have some kind of REST client which makes a call to some endpoint or something like this. So you would do it like that. Okay, so now that we have that, the only thing that's left is in the enable our client to connect to this. So we're gonna create person controller. So this is a REST controller with some request mapping to something like /API/person. And what it does, it has a get mapping with something like /ID. So we're going to be passing an ID and public person. And now this is what I was talking about. We don't really want to expose the person core entity outside. So we want some person DTO here. And let's name this one get. And it's going to take in a path variable, which is going to be of type string. It's going to have a name ID. And now we can, as we talked about it earlier, we can directly inject the person service here. So we can say private person service service. So this is managed by Spring, so we can simply inject it here. So this is what we are creating. Again, the person service is in the core, but we are in the in package, and the in can talk with the core directly, so there is no problem for us. And we can say here get ID, and this returns us a person. So this is the entity, and if this person is null, we're just gonna return null. But if it's not null, we want to convert it. But we also need this person DTO. So let's create in the in package, let's create some DTO. This is really simple DTO. Private string ID, private string name, private string street. So let's say that it doesn't really have the full address, and then private string email. So it has a different structure than what you would expect from the entities. So maybe this client that's using this controller only needs this, but some other client might need it differently, so with a different structure. So you could have multiple APIs, multiple public APIs here, and your core can serve to it. What is cool also now, since we are having our person DTO, which is so our public API, and our person core entity, if something changes here, so you don't want to have a property name street here, you want to have it street name or something like this, then you don't have to change your core. Your core is totally independent of this. You're completely isolated. Okay, so now all that's left is to create a new person DTO here. Let's name it DTO, and now we just map the stuff that we need. So we set the ID from the DTO ID, sorry, not from the DTO, from the person ID. We do the same for set name, so get, so this is just name and this is just ID. Sorry, I'm moving a bit too fast. DTO set street, which is going to be person, address, street, and what else did we have? DTO set email, yeah, which is going to be person dot contact, or no, person, yeah, email, which is of type contact, and then email. So maybe this is not the nice naming, so we can rename this to contact, and it's a bit clear what exactly we're doing. So we're getting the person contact, which is the email. So let's say the contact could have different values. So you might have here string telephone or something like this. So you have different values. This is also valid, but then you're just setting this one. And yeah, all that's left then is to return the DTO. And let me check then if we have done all the things that we needed here. Yeah, so now we are missing the telephone, so let's just put this one to null. Okay, so I think this is it. So what we exactly talked about, we have, let's put it back down. So we have our core package, we have the in and we have the out. So the core is defining all of the core functionalities or the main logic of our application. So we have something called entities. We recognize them by their identifier. So they have some kind of identification. So they're not just defined by value. And this is the same, so the true for both of these, but the difference between these two is that address is just an entity. It doesn't handle any other entities, any other value objects, while person does, which makes it a root aggregate. So it's aggregating other entities and it's aggregating other value objects. And the value object, which is here, is something that doesn't have identification. It's just defined by value. In this case, it's just a contact, which is defined by email or by telephone, whatever. Okay, then the other things that we have here are the ports. So these are the interfaces which are defined in the core, and they define the functionality which core needs. So this is what core needs from somebody outside. So we need some kind of caching. So we have the add and we have the get methods, and then the same for database. We have some access to the database. We don't really know what kind of database. We don't really care. The core doesn't care. Same for caching. Core doesn't care if it's cached in memory or it's cached in Redis or it's cached in wherever, I don't know, it doesn't matter for the core. And then we have a service which is kind of orchestrating all of this together. So it's actually defining a use case as we had in the task. So get it from the cache in case of cache miss, go to the database, add it to the cache and return the database one. So in the next time then you can fetch it from the cache. And then besides the core, we have the out package where the adapters are. So those are the implementations of the ports that we mentioned. So these are things where you can actually use some outside dependencies. So here we have a cache port which is using in-memory storage, but if you want to change to Redis, we can simply do that and our core will never know about it. Same for the database one. And then the in, this is where somebody can request something from our application, so from our module for it, whatever, where we have, for example, here just the REST interface, and here we are allowed to access the core directly. We are allowed to depend on it and use its services or whatever directly. Yeah, that's it. So this is everything that I wanted to show you. As you can see, the hexagonal architecture is actually quite simple and it has a lot of benefits. I won't go into all of the details. You can read about it online. There is a lot of documentation about it, so I'm sure you'll find it. But if you have some specific questions with hexagonal, Spring Boot working together, domain-driven design or something like this, just drop it in the comment and then I'll try to get to you. Okay, cool. So thank you for tuning in and I'll see you in the next one.